Hi folks, this video is going out primarily to Ken McNutt, who is another YouTuber. He doesn't make videos yet, but he is someone who comments regularly on my channel. He is both a supporter of me and an uncompromising critic as well, which is exactly what I need in my life. I need more of that. So Ken and I have been discussing recently science in relation to myth. He's not comfortable with this view that I hold, that science is the modern myth unrealized. So I'm going to attempt in this video to defend that view. And if there's a general theme to this video, it's that I don't think science, as in the physical sciences, I don't think it's enough to go exclusively by them, to let the scientific method alone dictate all of your thinking. So that's not going to be a popular position with atheists. So hear me out, and maybe something from the way I think will maybe rub off on you. So anyway, in order to start this off with Ken, I asked him a very particular question. I asked him, what is energy? And I asked him to answer that without resorting to an abstraction. And here's the answer that he gave. A very fair question. My simple answer: energy is the amount of force necessary to move a certain mass a certain length. Of course, I also know that through Einstein's equation, energy and mass are convertible. So then it could be said the entire universe is made of energy. Except currently some of it is in the form of matter. Once you start considering dark energy and dark matter, that's where the real questions start. Solutions to the questions are currently being worked on. Okay, that's a good answer. And it's an answer that I can work with fairly well to talk about what it is I want to talk about. And that is, all science is basically a series of symbols that represent things that we observe in nature. The important thing to realize is that the symbols are not the reality. The symbols are an observation of reality. So matter is a symbol of something observed. Distance is a way of symbolizing something that's observed. So you defined energy in relation to matter and distance and force. So we've got these symbols, and we appear to know what energy is if we just use these other symbols. But the trouble is, when we start using the other symbols, we end up referring back to energy. And there is a kind of pretense that we've actually explained ourselves, that we've got to some kind of answer to what stuff really is, what it's really made of. And to simplify this greatly, it's kind of like the way you say everything is made of energy. But you can also say, to swap that round the other way, energy is the stuff that everything is made of. Now, whether you say it one way or the other, you're just using A to refer to B, or B to refer to A, but at no point do you ever get to what it actually is. And energy is basically the ultimate question of science. But when you really think about it, when you really think about the way we use symbols, it's actually a nonsense question. The question, what is energy? Now, it wasn't that I was asking you a trick question. It was that I was trying to get you to see the way we use symbols. I mean, this isn't exclusive to science. If you think of how we define words, if you ever encounter a word that you don't know the meaning of, you refer to a dictionary, and you then learn the meaning of that particular word by another bunch of words that are all written. But that presupposes that you know what that bunch of words actually means. But if you didn't, you would have to look up definitions of those bunches of words. So it's all kind of relative. The meaning of one word relies on the meaning of another word, which relies on the meaning of another word. And it all presupposes that you just have a kind of a sense of the meaning of things. In other words, we're kind of getting into the realm of abstraction here. Now remember, my question was, can you tell me what energy is without resorting to an abstraction? But you resorted to an abstraction. Well, indirectly you did. You referred to other things that you don't think are abstractions, but if I forced you on it, if I forced you to start saying, okay, what is distance? What is mass? It would ultimately come back around to this idea that we use everything to define everything, which doesn't really explain anything. It's just, here's an observation of something in nature, here's a way of representing it symbolically. So that's what science is doing. Now, if we go way, way back in time and we look at the way people, handled their beliefs and handled their way of looking at nature way in the distant past. And my favorite example of this is Thor, the god of thunder. So ancient man had gods for all kinds of things in nature, for everything basically. There was a god of fertility, there was a god who controlled the seas, and there was the god of thunder. So ancient man witnesses the phenomenon of thunder and he asks himself, what is that? And he doesn't know. So he creates a symbol for it, a symbol appropriate to his level of understanding of the world. Now, bear in mind, you've got to put yourself in the mind of that kind of a person. He's never heard of what an atom is. He doesn't know anything about our modern science. He probably still thinks that the world is flat. Okay? So he decides to call this Thor because he realizes there's something behind this. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to call it Thor. And he personifies it as a god. Now, there may be all kinds of reasons why people saw forms of intelligence behind the forces of nature. That was because they were making very vague approximations and they didn't have a very good sense of epistemology, a very good sense of how we know, what are the best set of rules to use in determining truth from error. So they made all kinds of vague abstractions, and that's what gods basically are. They're abstractions. And they're highly inaccurate. But I'm just trying to get you out of the way of thinking that what ancient man did was stupid. It wasn't stupid. It was a way of looking at the world appropriate to a more primitive level of understanding. So, although with modern science, it appears that we are doing something completely different than what ancient man did, but we're not really. We're still looking at the universe and relying on abstractions. It's just that our abstractions are much more detailed and intricate than they ever were in the distant past. So we can look at thunder and lightning, and we can know a little bit about electricity and atmospheric pressure, so we can get a handle on a way of observing this that is much more detailed. But we don't really know what electricity is. We don't really know what atmospheric pressure is. We may delve into it and learn more about it, but ultimately it all boils down to energy, and we don't know what energy is. We don't really know what anything is. There is a colossal mystery at the heart of everything. And we've got to realize that all we're doing with science is myth-making. But we're doing our myth-making with a much more rigorous rule set about determining truth from falsehood. Okay? But it's fundamentally important to realize that it's the same process. It's just improved. Science is the modern myth unrealized. It's actually the natural evolution of religion, in a sense. Religion evolves into science. It's not that religion's a dirty word and science is fantastic. Religion naturally evolved into this. Man was a religious being before he was a scientific being. So that was a natural process that we went through. Religion's only a dirty word in the sense of authoritarian religion. That's where it becomes poisonous. The original religious impulse in man is more one of wonder, more one of looking at the universe around him and thinking, what does all this mean? What is my relation to all of this? Is there something behind all of this? That's a noble religious impulse. It becomes poison when a bunch of men get it into their head that they represent God and they can tell the population what to do, and they can get in the way of the population's relation to this great beyond by saying, oh, don't look out there, look to us, we have all the answers, we can tell you all about it. So that's what you've got with not all religion, that's what you've got with religions like Islam and Christianity, whereas the people in the East, they had a far better handle on things. Where if you look at Hinduism, with it had a pantheon of gods and goddesses, but they were all understood to be masks of Brahman. And Brahman, which you could think of as synonymous with God, Brahman literally means that which cannot be imagined. And to me, that is the best definition of God that I've ever come across. Because the idea of God, bear in mind, the idea of God, maturely understood, is not a man in the clouds with a beard. It's not your big brother or your father who's taking care of you, some human-like consciousness that you've just invented with your brain. That's along the same lines as polytheism from the past, really. It's just it takes away all the gods and turns them into one. So we know that's not true. But the idea of God, the term God, as a symbol, as a useful symbol, can still be used as an abstraction. You don't find me using it often, and it all depends on what sort of audience I have. But a deist who believes that God is aloof, that God is not a personal God, not a being in the sense of a human-like consciousness, a deist has a better appreciation of what this thing beyond space-time is. A pantheist has another better appreciation than monotheism, because you asked me to defend my pantheism. Well, I can defend it. I can defend it rationally. I can't defend it with evidence, because when you ask a person to defend God by saying, where's your evidence for God? That's a way of saying, show me the evidence within space-time for the concept that exists beyond space-time. And that's just a nonsense question. It's treating the question like it's an empirical question, when it's not an empirical question. God is just the label we put on the thing that we do not understand, of the impenetrable mystery that is at the heart of life, at the heart of the universe. And we have to rely on abstractions, because by virtue of our limited position within space-time, we can't get to what that is. And I specifically say what rather than who. Now, the reason I particularly choose pantheism as let's say the most accurate abstraction that I can make about who or what God is because I understand the laws of thermodynamics. So you see, I'm using science to augment my understanding. It's not that, I'm speaking to you particularly here, you've accused me of using science when it suits me and then dispensing with it when it doesn't suit me. It's not like that. If I could use science for absolutely everything, I would, but there are just certain areas where it can't reach. And those areas are anywhere that our understanding reaches, comes in contact with the infinite. So my favorite example of this is the number pi. Pi is a real number, real in the sense that it's tangible. You can begin to write it down as its actual value in digits, but you can never get to the end of it. Even though every single one of those digits is a value that is in no sense random, you will never get to the end of it. The trillionth decimal place of pi is a particular digit between 0 and 9, but it would take several lifetimes to discover what it is. And even then, You're just getting started on the actual value of pi. You can't get to the end of it, but it's real. Okay? Everything, the finite is what you're stuck with. When you're stuck with body, mind, consciousness, you're stuck with the finite. You're stuck with what's relative. You can't get to the infinite. You can't get to the absolute. But you know that it's real because you come across it. The other place that we come across it is in considering the origin of everything, where we end up with this Big Bang, this singularity. And the singularity is a point at which space-time becomes infinite. And even Hawking says that's where the laws of physics break down. You just can't go there. But it's real. You see what I'm getting at? So, if something is real, but can't be got at by the physical sciences, we have to resort to models of reality, to abstractions, to trying to make sense of the universe with what data we have. You can't always just go, where's your evidence? Where's your evidence? Because we're not in the arena of empiricism. You can't put God in a test tube. If you could, it wouldn't be God, it would be a piece of the created universe. I hate the term created universe. I use that in error there because ultimately there is no creation. The reason that I am a pantheist is because I know that the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Energy is absolutely permanent. Even with the Big Bang, it was not creation of something out of nothing. It was all the energy of the universe in a point smaller than an atom. The energy was always there. It was never created and it will never be destroyed. There's just this constant changing in form. Nothing is ever lost. So what I understand by this is that the very quality that a philosophically mature appreciation of God puts upon God is that God is the concept beyond space-time. God is eternal, permanent, uncaused. And then when I look at energy, the same thing is true of energy. Therefore, what we mean by God and what we mean by energy is the same thing. Now bear in mind, I am in no way anthropomorphizing God. I am not thinking of this word in any sense like a human-like consciousness. I'm just saying this is the symbol, the term that I can use if I wish to symbolize, as the Hindus would say, that which cannot be imagined. But it's real because we encounter it, or we encounter the edge of it when we encounter the infinite within science. Okay? So, deep video. Hopefully I won't get lost here, and hopefully I'm keeping you with me to some extent. Now, where do we go from here? I am at risk of losing my train of thought completely here. So, there is a tendency among atheists to work by the physical sciences alone. And I hope I've illustrated to some extent that that's not enough. Because then you're always... when you say there's no evidence for God, you've actually put yourself in a bind. Because if you live by the physical sciences alone, and you're only looking for physical evidence, and if you can't find physical evidence, well, you just go, well, it's not true, it's not real. You've actually put yourself in a position that if it weren't true, you've bound yourself in a way of thinking that prevents you from ever finding out that it would be true. That's part of the problem of relying on science alone. So there has to be this flirtation with possibility, this allow yourself to model reality in ways that do resort to abstractions. And it's not wrong to do this, because even the likes of Hawking does this. I read his recent book, The Grand Design, and he talks about how he models the universe in such a way that at the Big Bang there were many universes, and most of them didn't quite work out right. The laws of physics worked a little bit differently or whatever, and there were different conditions, so the universe burnt out quickly. So if you give yourself an infinite number of chances, so if you imagine the Big Bang not just erupting into one universe, but erupting into many universes in parallel dimensions, possibly an infinite number of universes, well, if you give yourself an infinite number of chances to make a working universe, which is our universe, right? That allows you to do away with any sense that there is any kind of intelligent core, dare I say that? I'm using the word intelligence very loosely. I don't want to anthropomorphize, and I know I'm in danger of doing that. But it allows, let me say it in a better way, it allows you a sense of modeling the universe purely in relation to physics, without any reference to something transcendental, something that can't be understood. So, is he true? And to put it crudely, it's kind of like saying, if you give yourself an infinite amount of chances to build a working universe with a kind of a random throwing out of parts, that allows you to do away with the idea of God. Am I wrong? It seems kind of like that to me. Ultimately, can I say that Hawking is wrong? No. But I think that my way of modeling the universe, where I see something deeply mysterious and transcendental at the heart of everything, that is a better way of modeling the universe. And who's to say that I'm right or I'm wrong? And here is where I hate doing this, but this is where my interest in parapsychology and the occult really comes in, because in pursuing that line of things, where I've had this interest in psychokinesis and everything, it allows me to see, having got positive results and having been very rigorous with myself, it allows me to see that there is something highly significant to consciousness that the vast majority of the scientific community is ignoring. Consciousness is as important as the material universe that appears to exist outside of consciousness. And this is being grossly ignored, and this leads me to the conclusion that the people who think they're getting kind of close to a theory of everything, I don't think they're close at all, because in the way that I model reality, I don't see it as an unconscious machine that is just made of bits and pieces that are flung out and behave entirely mechanistically without any form of consciousness behind it. I don't see that as being true. I think when Hawking models the universe in that way that he does, by positing all these other universes that fly out, that's a way of just really trying to make that mechanistic view of the universe work. I almost wish Hawking would wake up some morning and find objects flying about the room. Now, you may think I'm being stupid for saying that, but I know that psychokinesis is real. Now, it's small, but it's real. And even if I didn't have that evidence, I still have a view of consciousness, highly philosophical, but a view of consciousness that makes it highly significant. Because we can't get to the root of what we are, and yet we feel conscious. And a lot of people in the scientific end are minimizing consciousness as just a kind of, almost like a fungus that grew within organisms. You know, it's like the earth is a kind of a life-infested rock, rather than seeing life as something central to the universe itself, and biological life as just one form of this life. So I think, you know, consciousness is highly, highly significant, and the way that I model the universe is very different from the way that Hawking does. In a very real sense, there is nothing outside of my eyes. This thing that I perceive as the universe, as the physical universe, it doesn't really exist as a physical place. It's all inside me. Now that sounds like a total mad descent into solipsism, until you realize that I've got past the notion of me meaning Darrell Sloan, the ego. The only true self is the universal self, as Ken would put it. There is only one self that is everything. Nothing in the universe is a thing in itself. And to come to an appreciation of that, you need to understand, to some extent, non-duality. Whether you do that through quantum theory, or whether you do that through Advaita in the Hindu tradition, or whether you do it through Zen Buddhism, or whatever, you've got to come to an appreciation of non-duality. There's no doubt that non-duality is true. Things are not separate from each other. The universe consists of everything in relation to everything else. And when we perceive things as separate from each other, that's just a kind of pattern recognition happening. Nothing is separate from everything. There's just the universe. So if you model the universe just as a machine, that gives you the tendency to think that consciousness is really not important, not even real, a kind of illusion. And then you make this mad kind of disassociation where you're not even believing that you're real. You feel completely conscious, and yet you're saying consciousness is an illusion. It can't be an illusion. It's the most fundamental thing that you feel about yourself, even more than you can be sure of the existence of the universe outside your eyes. At least in some form, whether solid or holographic or whatever. So if I define myself, if I understand myself as the entire universe, focused into this particular point of limited awareness, well then the universe doesn't really exist outside of me. The universe is inside of me. The universe is me. So that is a radically different model of the universe. Now, if you say to me, well, where's your physical evidence that that's true? Well, I can't give you physical evidence because I'm not saying this from the standpoint that the universe is a machine. People who are constantly asking for physical evidence are people who have modeled the universe as a machine. Now, that's actually an assumption. A philosophical assumption, an unproven philosophical assumption. And if that's wrong, by constantly just going over this evidence for everything, if you're wrong, you've put yourself in a bind where you'll never be able to find out that you're wrong. So that's the problem with people who say, where's your evidence, for questions that are not evidence-based questions. Ultimately, what I'm really trying to reinforce with this is no matter what you do, it ultimately boils down to abstractions. And one of the things that Ken accused me of was that that's fine if you don't want to end up with any concrete answers about anything. But does science really provide you with concrete answers? Look at how much of it ends up replaced. I mean, when Newton was around, there was this feeling that these laws that he was coming up with were absolutely fundamental. And his idea of gravity is quite different from the way gravity ended up being understood under relativity. And we now know that relativity doesn't fit with quantum theory, and we are able to observe that quantum theory is true from the double slit experiment, etc. So you see the way there's this constant replacement of ideas. So put yourself in a position, could we even speculate what kind of model of reality we're going to have 2,000 years from now? Do we think we're still going to be talking about a universe of atoms that are like the Lego blocks of reality? I think we're going to have probably a vastly different understanding if the trends of science continue the way they are. But I think there's this constant sense, this wrong sense with people that they're always very close to getting a theory of everything. Whereas I think it's probably very far away. And due to, my interest in the occult and psychokinesis and psionics and what I've discovered through that avenue, I think it's really far away, folks. There's this feeling that, if we can just make gravity tie in with electromagnetism, etc. Then we'll have the theory of everything. It's all worked out, and we will have a model of reality that we will never be able to replace. We will no longer be working with symbols that are abstractions. We will be dealing with reality itself. We are not there yet, and it's highly questionable how close to that we really are. So we are myth makers. That is what we are doing. And we are using a scientific method that allows us to be quite accurate in the way we handle our myth making. But at the same time, a reliance on this scientific method alone tends to exclude things that can be shown to be true by other means, such as my personal experiments with psychokinesis. If I had a very rigorous hold on the scientific method, I would never have even started experimenting with this stuff. And at the same time, you've got to deal with big questions of philosophy, like, is the universe all mind or all matter? Is mind separate from matter, or are they the same thing underneath? What is energy? These big questions. That's the domain of philosophy. And you can't keep saying, where's your evidence for X, Y, and Z? It doesn't work that way. The reason that I believe in the kind of worldview that I have is because it is given whatever knowledge I can acquire, this is the view that makes the most sense of the available data. Do I have all the data? No. Neither do those who are relying purely on the scientific method. But I have considered an awful lot more. Because I've delved into philosophy, I've considered an awful lot more than the vast majority of atheists, who, I don't want to be rude here, but in a sense, there is a tendency to simply throw away the church and replace it with the classroom. And the things you're taught in school become elevated as the kind of religious dogma. Because the scientific method is not perfect. It is just a means, and not the only means, of modeling reality. Okay, I think I've said all I wanted to say. I'm not sure how successful this was. Anyway, I'll throw it out there and we'll see what happens.